Do you find me fuckable in my tight leather pants? If you find me touchable, extend your hand for a grab.
Welcome to Hard Talks with Chris and Friends, where topics that are hard or will make you hard are talked about, where things get real and unfiltered. Here is your host, Christopher Velasquez.
Hello, you guys. Welcome back. No matter who we are, we need blood. No matter if you're rich, poor, you're famous, not famous, we all need blood. And sometimes it feels like there's gatekeepers that are in charge of the blood and that don't let us donate blood because of several reasons. But in the last couple of years, having conversations with the person that I'm going to have on, I realized that those people that we think as gatekeepers are only following the rules, and that there's someone else behind that setting the rules. And I think a lot of us don't know that, so we put the blame on the wrong person without understanding that there are certain guidelines and certain procedures that these gatekeepers, quote unquote, need to follow, and that the blame is always, or it has been, put on the wrong party. So I know this person for a while, and he's a super smart, works in this blood industry, I think it's called. Well, I'll figure it out with him. But his name is Rodney. I am so excited to have you on. Hello, how are you, Rodney?
Hey, Chris, I'm good, thank you. How are you? Thank you for having me.
I'm good, thank you. Start with, how's your quarantine going?
Quarantine is just a mess, isn't it? I think even though we all want to be safe and stay safe and do right by our fellow citizen, our neighbor, it's tough, right? I mean, staying inside and doing what we need to do to indeed be safe, it's tough because we're sort of cutting ourselves off from what we as human beings need, that social contact. So I won't lie, it's not easy, but I am fortunate enough to be able to work from home, and I know that's not everyone's blessing right now. So many are having a difficult time. So all in all, I am doing well. Thank you for asking.
No, thank you. You work for the blood industry. Ooh, that sounds so just McKiving. The blood industry, like the blood diamond industry. That's what you work for. Would that be the correct word? I keep trying to. I don't know if it's my ideas of what donating blood is, but I keep in my head, it keeps, anytime I talk about it, it seems like a mob organization or like a mysterious power lords, So, but is it an industry, or what would it be under?
That's so funny. So yes, blood is indeed an industry. It's a business. Now I work for the American Red Cross. My role is not specifically in blood, or as we call it, biomedical services. As you know, the American Red Cross is a responsive agency, right? We respond to emergencies and disasters. And so under our umbrella of services, blood or biomedical services is one of those lines of service. But as you know, we also are disaster responders. So we have a disaster cycle services team. In fact, that's probably our largest aside from blood. We respond to more than 70,000 emergencies or disasters each year. And then we also do training services too. So if you think of first aid, CPR, even babysitting courses, lifeguarding, swim lessons, that's a division in and of itself. That's training services. So those are our three largest industries. But indeed, biomedical services or blood is, yes, it's a profit center. It is one of our 5 lines of service.
That's funny that you brought up some of the services, because I know the Red Cross because of 2 services actually. The first service is obviously the donation, blood donation, and that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But the other service is lifeguard certification, because when I was a lifeguard, which I was a lifeguard in high school, I did have to go through you guys to get my certification, but I was already soured to the Red Cross. So I was very like, I don't want to do this. But since I am a lifeguard, and you guys were one of the biggest places that gave that certification, I resentfully went with you guys. So to the topic So today's topic, we're going to talk about donating blood and what those policies are and what they were before. And I think the misunderstandings, misconceptions of this blood industry. So before we dive more into that, why don't you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I will. Absolutely. A little bit about me. I've been with the Red Cross organization for almost 5 years. I'm approaching the 5-year anniversary. Before that, I was self-employed in Los Angeles, doing some real estate, vacation rentals, and some consulting in the diversity and inclusion space. And so it's really diversity and inclusion that I represent at the Red Cross. And of course, diversity and inclusion applies to all of our lines of service. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, especially as it relates to blood. But then before my years of self-employment, I was doing diversity and inclusion work for Hilton Hotels Corporation, which is known as Hilton Worldwide today. And that's really where I began to dive into the diversity and inclusion space. And so really when we talk about diversity and inclusion or D&I, we're talking about all the things, all the factors that make individuals unique. And certainly that includes people of color. It certainly includes our queer community. It includes the aging community, people with disabilities, and several other factors, right? And so thinking about that from a business perspective, we really begin to analyze, why those things are important. Why is it important that we consider diverse communities in all that we do? And so you're right, Chris, you and I have had a number of conversations on not just blood, but then, diversity and inclusion and what organizations, corporations, nonprofits are doing in this space as it relates to D&I. And we're hearing more and more and more about it, and it's great. But what's more important than talking about it is the actions, right, that these organizations are taking. So yeah, I look forward to talking about those actions as it relates to blood with Red Cross and any other thing that you'd like to discuss. And can I say, Chris, thank you so much for creating the space, because listen, just like you, as a gay man, I too had questions, concerns, and I'm so grateful for the opportunity that the Red Cross has provided to me to understand how this works. And you're right, it's information that it does take some desire to get to know and to understand, because it's very easy to have those misconceptions and misunderstandings just based on the general knowledge that's out there. So thanks for creating this opportunity to provide some understanding.
You and me had this conversation maybe, I want to say like 2 or 3 months ago. We've had this conversation twice actually, but and like I told you, I think because so this conversation started because I heard a podcast where they talked about the Red Cross, and they kind of voiced how gay people overall have a sour feeling towards the Red Cross and towards not only the Red Cross. I'm not going to target the Red Cross, but why I think you and me have talked about this too. The Red Cross is such a recognizable brand or organization that it feels like the Red Cross is the one in charge of this. For the longest, I thought the Red Cross was in charge of all of this. I remember being in 9th grade. I think it's 9th grade. Yeah, I think being in 9th grade and wanting to pitch in and kind of wanting to help the world. I think when you go into 9th grade is you kind of get this idea that you want to change the world. Like you're trying to figure out what way you're gonna head to be a grown-up and what's gonna be your career you're taking. And for us that want to change the world, we start kind of thinking how we're gonna do that, right? So I was obviously not the smartest cookie of the bunch, the best looking cookie of all the cookies, but not the smartest cookie of the bunch. So I knew that my smartness was not gonna get me there, and I was having a hard time knowing how was I gonna do that. And I remember my teacher specifically being like, hey, you guys, like, this week, the end of the week, we are gonna have a blood donation, a blood drive, and the Red Cross is doing it, and you guys should donate, and gave us all the reasons why it's good to donate blood, right? And I remember being like so excited and being like, oh, here you go. Like, I don't have to donate money. I don't have to do, I don't have to work. Like, I could just show up, give my blood, which I have a lot of, and change someone's life or help in someone's life, right? And then I remember showing up that day and being so excited, getting Brit in the morning and being like, let's go. Like, we're going to do this right before class. Like, that's going to make us feel good all day and cheery. And I remember sitting and, you fill out the paperwork, and then like just the regular, like, what's your name, what's your address? Did at that point I had to give my mom had to sign something. So I had to give them that. And it was this whole thing, right? And then there's like the pre-interview, like right before they take your blood. The girl, like, it all going well until we got to the, have you had sex with another male? So when she said that, I remember being like, yes, I have. And her being like, oh, I'm sorry, you can't donate blood. And I remember like feeling like so mad. Like I didn't understand why. And she was just like, oh, well, I think she tried to explain it to me. And I was just like, it makes no sense. Like, that makes no sense. Like, that's ridiculous. That is stupid. And you're homophobic. Like, that, just remembering saying you're homophobic. Like, it's because I'm gay. And not understanding that and I mean, thanks to you now understanding why, right? So, I mean, I already gave you kind of how my bad blood started. Sorry for the pun, but how my bad blood started with the Red Cross. That was basically after all of that happened. I was like, never again. Like, just forget it. And I'm not gonna lie, like, later on, I realized that all you have to do is just say no. And you kind of donate, you could just donate blood. But that's not the right way. And we shouldn't be doing that. But for the longest, it was just like, I felt like that was the only way. If I did want to donate, that was the only way to do it, and that goes back, I think, to that whole idea of, that feeling of, just because I'm gay, they're not letting me donate, and not knowing that there is more to that. It's not just because I'm gay, it's because of these other reasons,
Those stories are so important. And to your point, those kinds of stories have lasting effects on not just gay men, but all people who are deferred from giving blood. And so I do want to talk a little bit about that and come back to your experience.
So why don't you give us a little bit, and I'm talking about back then, or the old rules, I guess, because spoiler, there's new rules. Spoiler to this show, there's new rules, and we'll talk about them a little bit further. But why don't you give us an idea an idea of what were the rules before?
Sure, of course. So prior to 2015, around 2015, prior to 2015, there was a lifetime deferral that prevented men who have sex with men from donating blood, period. Now, the biggest misconception is that deferral, that lifetime deferral, or any of the regulatory abidances that we have to adhere to as an organization, that's not set by the American Red Cross. Red Cross does not establish those guidelines. We do not do that. That is set by the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration.
Okay, good, because I thought so. It is the FDA.
It is the FDA. Yeah. Well, several people think it's the Red Cross. Some people think it's the CDC.
I used to think it was the CDC. I kept going like, even after you told me, I was like, oh yeah, the CDC is the one that is in charge of this.
Well, and the CDC is certainly a part of that dialogue, but the guidance is set by the FDA. And so every blood center, not just the American Red Cross, but every blood collection agency has to abide by the guidance set forth by the FDA. Now, because the Red Cross is the largest, it's the leading blood collector and blood provider in the United States, we provide 40% of the nation's blood supply. We are not the only blood center, blood collection agency. There are dozens of others. And so no matter which agency you go to give blood, or no matter which agency a hospital uses to administer their blood supply, every blood collection agency throughout the entire blood industry has to abide by FDA guidelines. And so, yes, to your point, those have changed over the years. But when you went to go donate, which would have been prior to 2015, at that time, it didn't matter when you ever had sex with another man. It was a lifetime deferral at that time. Now, I will say this. Even though those guidelines are set by the FDA, how you were treated when you went to a blood center, I absolutely think that agency should take full responsibility for that. No matter who you are, who you sleep with, what you've done in your life, for what reason you are deferred, I believe, and our agency believes, every single person should be treated with the utmost care, concern, and respect. Because you've given your time to walk through that door and to give what we call the gift of life. And so whether you were able to actually give or not, when your experience should have still been one that provided you with the utmost care, concern, respect that you deserve as a human being. So I always remind, every person who's ever given blood or has ever even volunteered, whether it's for our organization or another, that experience should always leave you feeling respected for, the time that you gave to come in, to participate and to really, again, provide that gift of life. So just know that should always be an expectation, no matter what the outcome is.
And like I said, I remember her being nice about it because I remember it was a girl, and I remember her being like very sweet about it. But it just, I think, I mean, and you're talking about a ninth grader that probably was like, this is like the one thing he had to look for that whole like month. So I don't think, no matter how sweet she was or how nice she would have been about it, it crushed me. And not having that education about it. So the way I understand is by correlating it to different things. So the FTA is the one that's the guidelines, and the rest of you kind of follow.
Correct.
Which would be like the FTA does, tells restaurants how they should clean and how they should do stuff. So you guys are just, and the Red Cross is just worldly known. So when you as kids, it's like McDonald's, when you think about fast food, you think McDonald's. You think a burger, you think McDonald's. Even though, yes, there's millions of burger places and a lot of different brands that do the same thing, but just the correlation between fast food and burgers is McDonald's. Yes, you might have other brands that you like, or it might not be maybe the first one, but as Americans, McDonald's is the big umbrella of what you think. So that's basically the Red Cross. Yes, there's other organizations, but the brand recognition is with the Red Cross because it's the biggest. I want to say it's the biggest, and it's the one that everybody's familiar with. And basically, it's a house known name that no matter what, someone will know at least. We might not know all the things you guys do, but we at least know that on the top, you guys are a place you could go donate blood.
Absolutely, yeah.
Is it, and I think this is another misunderstanding, is it just gay men who can't donate blood or who weren't able to donate blood?
Oh, that's a great question. And I think you're right. I think a lot of people have that misperception that it's just that deferral only applies to gay men, and that's not true. There's a list of reasons why a person who comes in to donate blood could be deferred. So just give you some random examples. If you've had recent tattoos, you can not give blood. If you've recently traveled outside of the country, that's reason for being deferred. If you come in and your iron is too low, you would be deferred, not able to give blood. So, and I think there are some countries that have where there are lifetime deferrals. So even though the men who have sex with men blood deferral used to be a lifetime deferral, that has now improved in recent years. But I do think there are still some. And again, I don't reside in our blood division, and I can certainly provide you on our website, redcrossblood.org. There's a list of deferral reasons there, and I should probably pull those up for you, and I can certainly share those with you. But yes, you're absolutely right. It is a misconception that it's only gay men who are deferred and not several other categories.
I ask you this question because I mean I do know, you know, the iron, and I do know the tattoos, and in my head I could come up with reasons why. Does that make sense? Like I understand if you got a tattoo, there might be ink in your blood, or there might be, you know, the ink does go into your body, so that, you know, that could be a pollution of your blood. I understand that, and if it's not healthy and your blood is already low, or your iron is low, you obviously, if it's already low, you don't want to give it out when you're already having issues with your own blood, right? So that, to me, those things kind of make sense, and I think to a lot of people those things make a sense. It's the as a human that I'm good and I'm standing and I'm healthy and I'm a bigger guy. I obviously I eat like all these things that are what's called, all these things that make you feel as a healthy human being, for them to just be like, hey, it's just because you're gay.
Right.
I think it feels like, oh, gay people are getting targeted. But when you put it as, no, there is places in the world that people from there can't donate. There are other, you know, there's other people. You're not just being targeted. And I think that's kind of how it feels.
Of course. Yeah. Yeah. And that makes sense. Of course it feels that way. And that's why I feel like that care and concern piece goes a long way, because number one, yes, it's our responsibility to educate, bring education around, you know, what the policy is, even though we don't set it. And then again, top of my list is that everyone should feel care and concern through the process. I'll also say too that you know, as you really begin to understand like how blood works, and this was a learning curve for me, you begin to understand what it takes, you know, what's required in that process of giving blood, right? So why is it that, I often get the question, why is it that, science certainly exists, testing, a fair amount of testing exists, you guys test blood, you know, if there's a problem with someone's blood, you should be able to catch that, right? You should be able to test for it, catch it, and so therefore, yeah, you should let, you know, all gay men donate blood, and if there's an issue, you can test for that. And so my response to that is absolutely right. We do test all blood supply that comes in, right? But if you remember back, and I think I asked you this, and I think you might be too young to remember, but if you remember back to the 80s, when this is where this really all began, obviously the onset of HIV and AIDS, but there was a very famous blood transfusion that occurred to a young boy by the name of Ryan White back in the early 80s. And through that blood transfusion, Ryan White contracted HIV and then later died. And because of that moment in history, it created this dynamic in our society and truthfully in the world that began in earnest this severe and swift response to higher standards in regulating the blood supply. And so I think anyone can understand that, you know, that at that time, right? And so then the conversation goes, okay, but that was back in the 80s. What about it? What about now? And so one of our responsibilities at the Red Cross, and I'm sure the FDA has this in mind, you know, as an entity, we have a responsibility to protect the nation's blood supply, right? And so are some of these policies overreaching? Sure, even we at the Red Cross can agree to that, right? Is there an opportunity for science to catch up and allow us to modify some of these deferrals? Absolutely, there's room to improve. And the Red Cross is an advocate of that. We are at the charge in wanting the FDA to revamp and continue to improve the deferrals. But does it mean that we have the technology to guarantee that we will catch every single issue with every pint of blood? The answer to that is no. The answer to that is no. We want to indeed ensure that blood supply is protected, and the best way to do that is to support the deferrals as they exist today, and, you know, working toward improving the deferral list. But in order to maintain the safety of the blood supply, it takes time for science and technology to be where it is. Red Cross is we depend on the donor dollar, right? We depend on the donor dollar. And those donor dollars support the systems and testing that we have in place today. But when deferrals change and regulations change, what that means is Red Cross then has to change our systems, change our intake process, change our testing protocol. It may mean that we have to bring on additional staff. And see, that requires additional donor dollars. But obviously then you look at, okay, so, because we are not federally funded either. Talk about another misconception. People think that the American Red Cross is federally funded. We are not. We solely depend on donor dollars. And so that, I think, is where some of the concerns and misconceptions come in, because we can't do it all in one day. If the FDA says, okay, now everybody can just give blood, and we're going to rely on the Red Cross and other testing agencies to just catch any, quote unquote, bad blood, well, that's a huge burden to the organization when science and technology and manpower come into play.
So, kind of talking about changing, when did the change happen from it's a lifetime, gay people a lifetime can't donate, to what was that next step, and when did it happen?
Great question. So the lifetime deferral that began in the 80s wasn't changed until about 2015 to a 1-year deferral. So what that means is, when 2015 and the FDA changed policy, it means, okay, if you're a gay man, if you have been abstinent, not having sex for at least 1 year with another male, you could indeed give blood. If you've been abstinent for a year, you could give blood. That was in 2015. And then we saw most recently.
Wait! Before you go into that,
yeah.
Let's talk about that a little bit. So now the policy was, if you haven't had sex for a year, you could donate blood. Now,
yeah,
that feels like you're expecting for me for a year. I mean, God knows I can't spend 20 minutes without having sex, but a whole year, like, what is going on? That kind of felt, and like a, what's the word? Like a, yes, we're supportive and we get you guys, but it didn't feel honest. This is where the conversation is moving on, and we'll see it again when the rules change. Yes, you guys are giving us, I don't know what's the word, charity.
It's kind of like, just throwing a bone, throwing a little snack out there without really providing the whole meal.
It's kind of having like that mom that tells you, like, oh, I accept you being gay and you're my son and everything, but let's just not have sex.
Right.
Just don't have sex. Like, it's okay, be as gay as you want, and but don't marry the man that you fall in love with, and don't have sex.
Of course, yeah, and we at the Red Cross don't disagree with that. We absolutely agree, because again, keep in mind, this is not a Red Cross policy. This is the FDA, and so while we are obligated to follow FDA policy, it doesn't mean that we don't have those same exact concerns that you just expressed, and that we continued after 2015 to have and share those same concerns with the FDA. So the American Red Cross led the charge in encouraging the FDA to change policy, because we felt the exact same way. There was more that could be done. Was it an improvement over the lifetime deferral? Sure. Did we see more donations? Yes. From gay men? Absolutely. Those who indeed had abstained and wanted to give the gift of life, did we see more of those donors come in? We absolutely did. So we know that there was impact there. At the same time, there's still room for improvement. You couldn't have said it better.
And do you know why was it a year? So what changed from hey, we can't at all to now we can? Was it that, like, oh, now there's more equipment, or we're better equipped to check blood, and giving us that little bit of space between, like, from a year to from now, that gives us a little bit of a better I don't know, the risks are lower. Like, so do you know why the change went from never to a year?
Yeah, you know what? I can't speak on behalf of the FDA, but what I can share is my best sort of educated guess is a couple of things. Number one, as I said earlier, science was beginning to catch up, right? So the science was there, and the support to change the deferral was there. Um, that's number one. And I think also the FDA also looks to other guiding principles around the world. So the FDA is regulated here in the United States, but they also look to models in other countries that have worked. So the FDA wasn't the first, sort of guiding or governance that had a 1 year deferral. There were others. There were other countries that had that, and it was working successfully, and they were being sort of used as the model. And so the FDA saw that, recognized that, and then began to strongly consider implementing it, which is what they did in 2015.
So now moving along on the timeline, and I guess moving along to like present, and I think when was this that the new rule dropped was on?
Oh, this was just earlier this year. What, March, April?
Yeah, I think, yeah, I want to say March or April, because I remember we had this conversation right after that happened.
Yeah.
Oh, let us know what's the new policy.
Yeah, sure. So earlier this year, like we said, March, April, the FDA revised their deferral of men who have sex with men from giving blood. Once again, this deferral was changed from the 1 year deferral to a 3-month deferral. Which again, given, and this is me personally speaking, given all that's happened with quarantine, you and I joke all the time. Wow, that 3 months seems kind of easy right about now with all the quarantining that's happening. So, yeah, a step in the right direction, but again, room for improvement. But we've certainly welcomed this change from the 1 year deferral to 3 months.
So yeah, so now it's a 3 months, and I'm gonna go into two different things. So the first thing is, so now it's 3 months. Obviously, we all felt like, wow, well, thank God. And I remember even having the conversation with you and kind of giving you the pushback of being like, oh, it took you guys long enough. You know, like, great, thank you so much. And I love how kind and willing you guys are to just give us 3 months. At the same time, reading articles of people who got denied and got sent away.
Yeah.
And not understanding. So
Right.
This was an important conversation we had, and I think you touched about it. You touched on it a little bit ago. Is what it takes to change your rules.
Yeah.
And it's not just oh, now the FDA said these are the new rules and these are the new guidelines starting. It's let's say it's on a Monday, starting Tuesday morning. Now everybody could just come and donate.
Right. Yeah. So great question, and I think such an important point, right, of information and what's the expectation and misconception. So this is really important. So mind you, I didn't hear about the FDA change until friends of mine had come to me and said, "Hey, I just saw this in the news. Congratulations." I had no idea. And so that speaks to the fact that when the FDA makes a move, they're not consulting with the Red Cross saying, "Hey guys, we're going to make this change. Get ready." No, it does not work that way. We hear about it when the rest of the world hears about it. And so when we hear about it, even though we've been advocating for these changes, there's no advance notice that these changes are going to happen. So when the FDA issues new guidance, then it's on the Red Cross to come out of, oh shit mode, oh shit, this is happening, to then now we have to catch up. And that catch up means, yes, changing our intake policy, because like your experience when you went in to donate blood, she's asking those questions. For every phlebotomist, every technician has that sheet of questions that they ask. Okay, when FDA changes that policy, now those sheets of questions that they have to ask is going to change as well, right? Well, we haven't created those because we didn't know that the policy was going to change. And even if we did have an indication on that there was a change coming, we didn't know what that change was going to be. until the FDA announced it. And so the intake policy has to change. Certain computer system, has to change on the back end. It might mean that we have to increase staff if there's going to be a number of increased donors coming through the door. And so it also means technicians now have to be trained on what this new policy is. So they're indeed asking the right questions. They understand what's happening. So all of that has to take time to work itself through the system. We have to make those changes and then implement those changes. And so when FDA made this change in, March, April, if you were to go through the door, as you saw in the media, people were like, great, FDA changed. I'm going to donate blood tomorrow as a gay man. If you walk through the door, because our systems had not changed, you perhaps were not even able to still donate. In fact, our implementation wasn't scheduled until June, July. Now, keep in mind, that's further complicated by the fact that we're still responding to COVID-19, and we've had some policy changes there. And we're still responding in the midst of, a great deal of social unrest that's happening right now across the nation. And even though those things are getting better, those things were such huge impacts to our industry that there's so much happening. All of these things just take time to implement. So if you were to go to a donation center today, your likelihood of having a smoother process than you would have if you went back in March or April, that's vastly improved. But I will say these things continue to take time to implement. So patience is very, very important.
I don't think we've covered this, but you are,
yes.
And you are a man of color.
Yeah.
So you do. I do want people to understand
yes.
that you do see these things as those two things, that you're not just, because I remember even when I did give you that pushback, I said, well, you don't understand. So it was hard to kind of put those things together. But then I remember you telling me specifically at one point, being like, I understand exactly where you're coming from. In the same time, I know what the rules are and I know how the insides work. And I think I told you, I was like, well, you are an inside player. So you do have a better idea. And I think that's why this podcast overall I wanted to do, is because I'm having a conversation about a topic with someone that knows the topic and does it for their living, right? So you're not just talking for your organization, not understanding this side of it.
Yeah. That's such a great point, and that's why I thank you for the space, because you're absolutely right. At the end of the day, when I leave my work at Red Cross, I'm still a Black man, and I'm still a gay man, and I will always be those things 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That is who I am. That is my identity. And so these concerns, I have these same concerns, and not even just as it relates to blood, but in all the things that we do, right? We want diverse communities, especially those communities who have been so unfairly unrepresented in our American history for far too long. We want to be represented. We want to be respected. We want to be heard. We want to be appreciated. I'm right there with you. And it's because of that I do the work that I do. And I am grateful for the opportunity that Red Cross has provided me in terms of leading a lot of the efforts that are very specific in how we care for diverse communities of color, our queer communities. I'm so grateful for that. And I'm especially grateful for what I've learned through this process, because just like you, prior to my stint here at the Red Cross, I too had those same frustrations, right? And just not understanding and feeling like, why is the organization so far behind? But now being an inside player and understanding, what's happening, I gotta tell you this, Red Crossers are truly, truly committed to doing the right thing. We are humanitarians at heart, and we want to make and implement so many of the desperate changes that are needed. We want that, right? And I'm able to see, being on the inside, the action and the steps that are being taken. What is not being seen by the outside are those steps, right? And so I'm more conscious of not just taking the steps, but also sharing in forums like this, and you know, whether it's amongst my friends or if I'm, you know, at conferences. Red Cross is actively working to make these changes and to put, you know, diverse communities in top consideration, whether it's with blood or whether it's with training or whether it's with disaster response, whether it's with, you know, who we employ. It is top of mind and top of action. And so I say that to say, you know, to all of your listeners, I'm really hoping that your listeners hear that, they embrace that, and they support the Red Cross for all that we, you know, not only are doing, but all that we're trying to do for all of our communities.
For me, biggest thing was, I think, realizing that Red Cross is like any other organization that has to follow federal rules and that are not, you know, in a bigger perspective, they're not allowed to make their own rules about who's donating blood and who's allowed and who's not allowed. And that if we really want to, you know, have these conversations, or we want to talk to people, the people that we should be talking is the you know, the FDA, not you guys. And obviously you guys are allies and you guys will help those voices. And I think because you guys are such a big organization, your voice is powerful. But the only people that really have a voice that really matters and that really could change stuff is us. And us, you know, directing our voices to the right person helps, and that's the FDA at the end of the day.
Thank you, Chris. Yes, thank you so much for saying that. So just like you said, if as we want to improve even the 3-month deferral, please send your questions, comments, concerns, you know, your frustrations directly to the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration. They are responsible for that guidance. We are doing the same thing, challenging the FDA, asking for continued improvement on the deferral lists. Because listen, as of right now, the nation is undergoing a blood shortage, right? So we need those donations. We need people to continue to come out and donate and provide that gift of life. But that wall, as you just mentioned, really comes down in a lot of cases to this deferral. And so it's something that we're continuing to ask the FDA to revisit and change. And I encourage all of your listeners, Chris, to challenge the FDA as well.
What do you know, so with all the changes have happened, you know, since I think March or April, what do you think this means, at least for us as the LGBT community, and what do these changes mean to us?
That's a great question. So a couple of things, actually, or several things, but I'll mention a couple. Change is always great, right? And it's great for a number of reasons. I think what we're seeing is science is catching up. Public sentiment is catching up. People aren't as dare we say, afraid of you know, the queer community and HIV and these things that have had lasting impacts on and toward our communities in years past. You know, those impressions are changing, right? And so I think, you know, I like to believe that the cries for equality and justice and fair treatment and respect of our diverse communities, I do believe that's being heard. And I think the changes that we're seeing today are indicative of that. And so I can appreciate and certainly respect and embrace that as well. I also want to underscore the importance, and you said this at the top of our conversation, the importance of blood. And we as human beings, as members of the LGBTQ community, people of color, blood is vitally important to our communities, especially communities of color where you're looking at things like sickle cell disease. And so I think these relaxed restrictions with the deferrals are going to really invite more people to give, so that we in turn can provide life-saving resources right back to the communities that need it, which again are people of color. If you're talking about sickle cell disease, I mean, that's a treatment that's needed regularly, but it's a treatment that depends on people being able to come and give blood so that we can make blood product to then provide those treatments. So those are the things I wanted to mention. And I just think it just means, so much, not just for the queer community or people of color, but for humanity as a whole, right? It provides us more opportunities to be of service in the ways that they're really needed the most.
Is there any other misconceptions that you feel like, I know we've covered a lot and we've talked about a lot of them, but is there any other misconceptions that you feel like are out there about the Red Cross or about, overall donating blood that that you want to clear up? Besides that, there's vampires and that you guys are all vampires that work at the Red Cross.
I think, Chris, one of when it comes to diverse communities, I think the biggest misconception that I like to challenge is that the Red Cross doesn't care, or that we're not doing, that we're not doing any some of these things. We're bringing swim instruction and water safety into diverse communities. Why? Because when you look at where drowning's happening, 60% of Black youth have cited they have little to no swimming ability. Nearly 50% of Latino youth are saying they have little to no swimming ability, and those numbers far exceed their white counterparts that do have swimming ability. So we're bringing more of those resources in diverse community. We're translating a number of our courses into Spanish that didn't exist in Spanish over the last several years. We're translating those into Spanish now. We're making them accessible for people with disabilities because the need is there. In terms of disaster cycle services, we're ensuring that we have Spanish-speaking volunteers that can go into our diverse communities and make sure that our resources are meeting those who predominantly speak Spanish. We're making sure that we're taking resources into African American communities when those communities don't feel comfortable coming to Red Cross chapters for whatever reason. We're just continuing to make ourselves accessible. So I could go on, but I think the number one thing to know is that we're out there, we're trying, and we will continue to try until all needs are met.
I want to thank you again so much for coming on. And I want to leave everybody with this thought. When you go and it might seem that when you go donate blood, they're turning people away. We need to think about, especially in this time and what's going on in the world right now, there are so many people and they don't ask you any questions. If you need blood, you need blood. So we need to keep that in mind, that if we go into this mindset where we're not donating blood because they're not going to take our blood, or we're not going to try to this, one day we might be on the opposite side and they're not going to ask us questions. They don't care who you are. If you need blood, you're going to get it, especially if they have it. But that's the key word, if they have it. And if we're not donating blood, they won't have it. Think about it as in, hey, maybe I have to wait 3 months, but I will be helping someone that needs it, and they're not going to turn it away. They're not going to be, you might be giving blood for someone that's gay that needs blood. Once again, if you just could give us a couple websites where if people want to do, a little research or want to look into it, they can.
Sure, Chris, absolutely. So you can find all of our information at redcross.org. If you're looking for specific information regarding blood donations, blood drives, you can go to redcrossblood.org. And of course, you can visit the FDA website for their contact information if you'd like to continue help us champion continued improvement with the 3-month deferral for men who have sex with men.
And once again, thank you so much, and thank everybody for listening. I hope to see you guys again on a later episode. So remember to like, subscribe, leave a comment. You can follow me on Instagram at Chris Diva, and you can follow the pod at Hard Talks with Chris. And I want to give a special thanks to Jamison for letting me borrow his song Fuckable for the intro and outro.
Spend my day doing squats and then some push-ups to be the fatal attraction.